All right, everyone, welcome back to Talk with Anand, episode number 29. Always having to battle technical difficulties are always a challenge, and we know that in the current world, usually it's the paper and the pen that works really well. But we have technology, that's why I'm able to join you live this afternoon to talk about Flames hockey, the All Star break, and much more, and a few concerning news items that have come out of the Flames locker room as well. We have a special guest this afternoon. I want to thank his time as well. We were originally planned to have him yesterday on board, but then I got into a mini day-to-day injury with an ankle pain and swelling. But I'm back into full force. Welcome back, everybody. We'll remind you, Twitter lines are open at CJY underscore Anand. That's where you can find me if you want to ask questions and chat with us this afternoon. YouTube live chat is also open if you want to jump on board and say hello and give us your questions. We would appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. I see a few viewers already, and Cumulative has joined us this afternoon. Cumulative, welcome on board. Yes, we got everything sorted out. Everything is fantastic. So, welcoming this afternoon back for a second time this afternoon is none other than Mike. From he does Wranglers hockey coverage and media for Hockey Talks Oilers. Mike, good afternoon. Technical difficulties always a challenge. How are you doing this afternoon? And it's beautiful in Calgary. What do you say about that?
Well, I lost you there for a second, but I'm back. I didn't quite hear the end of your question there, but I'm so glad to be here. I love your energy, love this entire thing that you put together, and I'm so happy to be here. What was it that you were saying?
My question was, we all love the technical difficulties, and my second point was the weather. How are you liking this warm trend of weather? I know you like going skiing and all that. How are you enjoying the warmer trend of weather?
Warm weather. It's I went skiing this morning. It wasn't great, to be honest with you. It's a little bit too warm. But it's been such a cold winter. Well, it's been such a cold January that getting this little bit of warmer stuff lately has been so nice here in Calgary, and yeah, it just lets you do some other things. Be nice tonight to be able to maybe go out a little bit and see a couple of my friends. And until then, I'm glad to be here with you. Thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us on a busy day and fun day you have ahead. I sent you a message earlier with a few topics we can cover. We can add your own topics as well. But thanks for joining me. First of all, I haven't done a post game show since we lost against St. Louis Blues. And then we had two games after that. That was the Columbus Blue Jackets and Chicago Blackhawks. We won the game against Chicago Blackhawks 1-0, which was in one of the best games, but we'll take the win. Yeah, let's hear your thoughts on a bit of the Blackhawks game that we last played before going into the All Star break.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't a very inspiring game for the Flames. Jacob Markstrom kept the minute. They gave up so many breakaways in that game. I thought, Markstrom had his moments. I don't know. I think the Blackhawks made it a little bit easy on him at times. And they get the one goal from Elias Lindholm. You gotta like that. I mean, in terms of just being able to theoretically bump up his trade value. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's the last game that he plays as a Flame. I mean, this is around the time last year when we saw Bo Horvat be traded from Vancouver to the Islanders. And it was kind of awkward because he was going to the All-Star game, and so was Lindholm this year. And Horvat had to wear his new team's jersey for the very first time at the skills competition. So it would be kind of weird if that happened with Lindholm. Obviously, excuse me, the All-Star festivities kick off tomorrow with the fantasy draft, and Elias will be there. And the Flames, three free agents. I think he is the most likely to go first. Although who knows what's going on with Chris Tanev, Noah Hannafin. I don't know that either. I mean, they could still be trying to engage with him on potential contract talks. They could be, at the point where they're ready to jump ship. But in terms of that game, yeah, I mean, you kind of summed it up. It wasn't the best game for them, and coming off four consecutive losses. You wanted to see maybe a bit more of a response if this is a team that you're actually looking at taking seriously as a playoff team this year, which I don't think they are. I don't think they should be, but some people do, and they didn't really add anything on to that pursuit.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the games really showed that they are not fit for the playoff run. Looks like now, did we lose Mike?
Oh, hold on, I'm here.
No, we didn't lose Mike. Okay, he's there. All right, so Mike, I heard Chris Tanev, he's under the radar of about 10 teams from somewhere I read. One of them recently being Ottawa Senators. What could, what according to you would look like a ideal return if we were to trade out Chris Tanev, especially to a team like Ottawa Senators?
Yeah, yeah. So Ottawa's an interesting team. They don't have a great prospect pool. I know Scott Wheeler at The Athletic had them at 31st in an article that just came out today. But Tanev does make a little bit of sense for them. That being said, I don't know why they would make that trade during the season when they have a chance to maybe sign him this summer. And they're not going to make the playoffs this year, highly unlikely. But if they were going to make that trade and try and invest in their future and lock up, I mean, the one positive I can see with Tanev is for them trading for him is you get first dibs at trying to sign him. You trade for him in March, and then you've got 4 months to try and lock him down and see if he's a good fit first. Give him sort of a trial run. But yeah, I mean, I have a hard time thinking that other teams that are actually going to make the playoffs wouldn't give up more. Ottawa's not going to want to give up its first round pick this year, obviously. I mean, they are not going to make the playoffs. They're going to be a team that should be picking high. And you look at Ottawa; they didn't make a first round pick last year. They didn't. They traded that pick for Jacob Chikrin. They ended up giving it to Arizona, and they picked Daniel Boot. The year before that, they gave up their first round pick to Chicago for Kevin or for DeBrincat, and then Chicago used that pick on Kevin Korchinski. And then the year before that, Ottawa used their first round pick on Tyler Boucher. So they've gone kind of 3 years without making a first round pick in a sense because Boucher was not projected to be a first round pick and he hasn't played very well in the AHL since he's gone down there, barring he's dealt with some injuries. But and then the last 2 years they haven't made a pick at all. Now this year they've got two picks, which is something worth considering because they got a pick back from Detroit in the DeBrincat deal when they flipped him. But it's difficult. I mean, if you're a team like Ottawa, you're not going to want to give up a premier pick for a guy like Chris Tanev. I would think that a trade that you'd be looking at with Ottawa is maybe a lower pick, like a second rounder or a third rounder, and maybe a player. And I'm not sure, like, Ottawa's not going to give up a guy like Ridley Gregg. They like him too much. A guy like Eric Brandstrom, maybe, but does he move the needle for this Flames team, right? Or a Jacob Bernard Docker, who's a local guy from Calgary, who played for the Okotoks Oilers, but I don't think he's a guy who necessarily moves the needle for the Flames. So it's kind of tough because Ottawa hasn't made the picks and they don't have the prospect depth. So they don't really have any guys who they can look at giving up. And they haven't made those picks, so they're less likely to give up actual picks going forward because this is a new management team that wants to put their stamp on this team. And it's just a tough trade partner. Like I can't. It is hard to conceptualize a trade for me involving Tanev going to Ottawa because I just don't see it. Like, what are they going to do? Give up Shane Pinto? Like, I don't see it. Right. So the most likely scenario is like Brandstrom or something. But even then, I think you could do better somewhere else. Hey, Walt.
Uh,
Hey, how you doing, Walt? I'm parked. I'm parked, Walt.
yeah, just want to clarify for our viewers. Mike is not driving right now. He's parked on the side of the road
We this
and just
this
about
game
to.
this came together in 15 minutes. I was asked, and then I pulled over and I stopped, and I'm here at Deerfoot City. Oh no, Walt.
All right. Thanks for that wonderful insight on Ottawa Senators. We'll look forward to see what comes under Cristana. So you said Lindholm is most likely the first person to be traded, then maybe Kristanov. Let's talk about our two goaltenders, Marstrom and Bladar. Would you consider any of them being traded? What are your predictions on it?
Well, I was talking about goalies in a group chat with a few friends of mine, and uh, we came to the realization that the last goalie with term on a contract, like a bona fide starting number one goalie, who was moved during a season with term, was Roberto Luongo. And Walt, go get some 2% milk, buddy. No, but yeah, no, it was Roberto Luongo like 10 years ago, traded from Vancouver to Florida, and there really hasn't been anybody since. There have been a lot of goalies traded as rentals, guys like Ben Bishop, Ryan Miller. There have been some others, guys. More recently, I'm trying to think, even like it's kind of tough. Marc-Andre Fleury to Minnesota was one a couple of years ago, but it doesn't happen a lot where you see a guy like Jacob Markstrom, who's got I think 2 years left after this one. It's just not really something you see. But I this year I think is a little bit different because we are seeing an unusual, I think, for the trade deadline time market in terms of so many contending teams need goaltending, or so many teams that want to contend need goaltending. Because you look at LA, LA has really fallen off. I think they've lost 14 of their last 16 games. It's nuts. And they have read into the season with Cam Talbot, Phoenix Copley, David Riddick. And I was like, and then it worked for them early on. And now it's like, no, not really. And there are other teams too. Colorado needs to solidify things. You go up and down the list. There are teams out there that need to fix their goaltending. There are teams that have had injuries. Carolina is only just getting Freddie Anderson back on skates. And who knows? I mean, those types of things, those health issues, like the one that Freddie had, those can be really, really difficult to come back from during a season. I think back to when Michael Stone missed like almost all of the 2018-19 season with blood clots. And when he came back, he was still like having to work his way back into being a regular. And he didn't look like it at first. So with Carolina, I don't know. Like, are you happy going into the playoffs with Antti Ranta and Peter Kochetkov? I don't know. So there's a lot of teams that need goaltending, but the big goalies out there on the trade market all have term. So you look at guys like Markstrom, and you look at guys like Elvis Merzlikins in Columbus, who has had a bunch of really good games. He had a shutout, I think, just yesterday against Seattle, I think, just after, that trade request became public. He has term left. A guy like Karel Vejmelka has term left, and then Markstrom has term left. And those are the three big goalies who I see as being, movable. You look at the pending UFA goalies, the market really isn't there. So this year, I think, could be a different year. I think we maybe could see a team like a team out there looking for a guy like Markstrom. The only problem is Markstrom has a full no movement clause. A guy like Merzlikins and Vejmelka, those guys are way easier to move. And, Markstrom, I think, has way better numbers than both those guys, but it's all up to him. If he doesn't want to go, and the Flames would have to ask him. So that's what makes it difficult. Not that I don't think there's a chance. Vladar, I mean, I think there certainly could be a team that looks for him, but he's strictly a backup at this point. You're not going to go to Colorado and say, do you want to give us a second or a first for Dan Vladar when they already have Georgiev, who is pretty much the same goalie, Ivan Prosvetov, who I don't think is really that different. So, it's a bit of a balancing act. I don't think they're going to trade both of them because they're going to want to have one of them to run tandem with Wolf next year. But I think one of them could go. It's just a matter of which teams are interested. There's a lot of them this year.
Yeah, definitely, Mike. I appreciate your insight stats. I like how you have all this information on top of your head. Well said. Yeah, we'll see what happens with the goaltending market. Tyler from our ex viewing has a question for you. Vancouver landing either Tanev or Lindholm. Which one is more likely?
I can see them getting both. I mean, they have some flexibility because they have contracts they would be comfortable moving. There's been a lot of chatter recently with Nikita Zadorov and what's going to happen there. Dan Milstein represents 5 or 6 people in Vancouver, so there's always going to be a consideration of his clients like being there, but also he is a very active agent. And I don't think Zadorov's been a very good fit in Vancouver. His underlying numbers have been horrible since they got him. And so I don't know. Maybe they look at flipping him. The chatter around Andrei Kuzmenko has been so loud all season. He's a guy who they could move. And I think you can look at Kuzmenko to Chicago and see Chicago looking to just ice a team pretty much. Maybe they give up like a fourth round pick for Kuzmenko or something. I don't know. It seems difficult for me to conceptualize how far Kuzmenko's value has fallen to the point where he scored 39 goals last year. People were saying this guy is worth the moon. If Vancouver had moved him at last year's trade deadline, they probably could have gotten a first and more. And now this year, he's probably going to be moved as a cap dump so they can actually add an upgrade. Elias Lindholm, I mean, just based on everything that I've seen, I'm not hearing anything in my own ear, but I'm seeing people saying, New York wants him really badly. The Flames in Colorado have been scouting each other like nobody's business this season. There have been multiple Flames scouts in Colorado games. I would say a half dozen to a dozen Colorado games, and vice versa. They have been, sniffing each other's backsides all year long. And so I think there's a bit of smoke there. And then Vancouver makes a ton of sense. And that is something where you listen to a guy like Rick Dhaliwal, who's super plugged into Vancouver, and he's been talking up how Vancouver's going to make a run for Lindholm or Gensel. And obviously, Vancouver is stocked to the nines with people who have either managed or coached in Pittsburgh. When you look at Alvin, who they just extended today, and Rutherford, who they just extended earlier this month, and Rick Tocchet, their head coach, all of them know Jake Gensel. Elias Lindholm, he has the familiarity with Rutherford because Rutherford was, I think, president in Carolina when they drafted him, but he left shortly thereafter to join Pittsburgh. Um, I don't really know. I think Vancouver totally could make it work. Vancouver, unlike Ottawa, has the prospect depth to make it work. They have guys like Lekkerimäki, who I don't think they will trade, but a guy like Willander, I don't know, maybe. A guy like the other defenseman. I mean, they have Elias Pettersson. They have drafted a lot of guys. I mean, the guys in the American League who they have like Vasily Podkolzin, and even I don't know, like they've got a bunch more guys than Ottawa does. They have that versatility in their system, and they have picks because they haven't been selling recently. They've made those first round picks. So Vancouver's a team where they rank first in the NHL right now. They would be very comfortable, I think, saying, okay, this is going to be a year where we have a chance to make some noise. We're going to give up pick number 32 in the draft because we believe that that's going to be that pick. Whereas Ottawa, I mean, they don't have any confidence. I don't think in their team this year. They've got a whole new regime that's still trying to parse out who's good, who's not. And then there's the Quinn Hughes factor because Hughes, is on a pairing with Philip Hronek. I think in an ideal world, Vancouver would love Hronek to be an engine of their second pair instead of playing with Hughes. I think that's, a big reason why they tried to, get him and for being that player. I think Hughes and Tanev is a pairing that the Canucks would love to reunite. I mean, the 2020 playoffs, that was their big pair. That was the pair that they rode to beat St. Louis in the first round. So I could totally see it being a package deal. I think Kuzmenko would be a terrific ad for Calgary. I mean, that's a guy who you can play on a top line, pump and dump. You play him, get him 30 goals or whatever. You try to at least, and then you sell him next deadline for as much as you can get. Perfect, right? If you're helping out the Canucks like that, they should be incentivized to maybe give you more assets for a guy like Lindholm, and then maybe you can profit off of it again next year. I think about what Arizona did, getting Shane Gostisbehere, getting a second round pick to take him from Philadelphia, and then the next year they traded him for a third round pick. So they didn't just get a second round pick; they also got a third round pick for trading him a year later. That's what you can maybe do with Kuzmenko. So yeah, there's a lot of different opportunities. I think Vancouver is a way better trade partner for Calgary than Ottawa is.
All right, Vancouver. Let's keep an eye on the trade deadline coming up, or even just right after the All Star break to see if you will see any movement within the Flames dressing room. All right, we'll give Mike a quick break. But before that, before we move on to our next point, I just want to remind you all, like Tyler did, join us in the Twitter chat. Come ask us questions if you want to get them answered. YouTube live chat is also open, AS Vlog. That's our two ways to get interactive and connect with us. So far, amazing points from Mike. So far we just talked about the so nice win against Blackhawks. Then we talked about a few ideal trade teams for the Flames. So whether Marshall or Vladar would get traded. Marshall, keep in mind, he has a non-move clause for at least the next 2 years. So we'll have to see what happens there. It may not be easy, but it can be done. Chris Tanev, he's under the radar for at least 10 teams, and we are just confused where which team would pick him. Ottawa Senators really had interest in Chris Tanev, and then we could see maybe Tanev or Lindholm in Vancouver as well. So that's your chat so far. So, Mike, our next topic I wanted to talk about are AHL rookies. I know you cover Wranglers. Wranglers luckily have got some depth back in their team this week. Schwind is back, Klapka is back, Coronato is back for the Wranglers. But what do you think? Who has stood out for you from the AHL Wranglers team when they were called up to the Flames? Maybe one or two players that have really stood out for you. They're ready to play in the NHL and have made you what you call struck, and he's that guy who can make great moves.
Well, it's tough to say because, the Wranglers are a team in transition. They've lost Connor Zary, I think, for good. They're not going to get him back. He's a Flame now. And then they've had a bit of a revolving door. Like, that's the thing with the Zary, is that he has been kind of an exception. Now, Pelche, I didn't see his first game back. I was a little bit busy that night, but from all accounts, I heard he did okay. Him and Kevin Rooney, obviously having that surgery at pretty similar times on the shoulder. Um, I like what I've seen a lot from Rory Cairns this year. He hasn't come up yet. He's a young guy. I have a story in the can on him. I'm just trying to finish it. It's been in the works for a while. But it's so interesting, his career path, where he went to the ECHL. By all accounts, I'm not necessarily certain he should have, but he did. He tore it up. By all accounts, he treated it as a pro. From my understanding, with Cairns going to the ECHL last year, that was more of a situation where it was Mitch Love saying, basically, this guy, I don't know if he sticks with us, I don't know if he's going to have a defined role in my roster. And he wanted to have the bottom six operating a certain way. And I think given the success of the Wranglers last year, I think it's fair to say, that might have been a valid point of view. And the thing is, people talk about players being top 9 or top 6 or bust. And, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that to a certain extent, but I do think Cairns might have been served ill to play on a fourth line last year with the Wranglers. Although, you could have made a case for him to get power play time or whatever. In any case, I don't think that has hurt him necessarily. I think it is something where he has come up after that year in the ECHL and done very well for himself. He's not the biggest guy. He can really shoot the puck. He's crafty. I mean, I talked to Trent Cull about him earlier this year, and he described him as a savvy little fella. And I think that's a pretty good way to describe Rory Cairns. He's just sort of a jack of all trades guy. Adam Klapka, I've liked this season. I'm not entirely certain he will be a long-term NHL player, but I think he has the skill to give it at least a shot, and I would like to see him come back up. I know he played like 2 minutes against the Blackhawks or something, but it's tough with these guys, right? Because they're coming up, they have limited ice time, and they are asked to stand out. And with a guy like Zary, he started scoring right away. And, that's what a guy who's picked in the first round is supposed to do. And it was sort of similar with Pelche. He wasn't scoring as much when he first came up, but he was very energetic and he pushed play. With these guys, I think they've had a bit of a harder time doing it. I look at guys like Cole Schwint and Walker Dewar and to an extent Klapka. And, they have mostly, I think, treaded water at this point. And that's not intended as a slight against any of those guys who, I think are skilled in their own ways. It has just been that, relative to the league average NHL player, and there are a lot of those guys, they have had, their issues standing out. And it was the same with Adam Ruzicka this year. And now he's gone to Arizona, and he'll get another hack at it. And, that's something that I think people lose sight of sometimes, is that for these guys in the American League, that is what happens in the majority of cases, is they come up, they get their shot, and they don't necessarily deliver to the extent of guys who are more proven. Now, that's not to say that guys shouldn't be given shots. I am the most ardent supporter of giving guys shots. I look at a guy like Matthew Phillips, who was in the Flames organization for years, and he never got a shot. And this year he's gotten a shot. Hasn't gone that well in Washington, but he's gotten that shot. And that's the thing that's happening with the Flames this year. And I think it is objectively a good thing, is that they are giving all of their guys a rotation into the lineup. And I think the next guy will be Emilio Pettersson. And after that, it might be Cairns. And after that, it might be Ben Jones. And to this point, I would say the only guys who have really stood out in a meaningful way have been Zary and Pelche when they have played. But that's not to say that other guys won't come up or that the guys who have come up won't become more impactful in the future, because I think that's absolutely potentially in the cards for guys like Schwintz and Klapka and Dewar potentially.
Interesting, yeah. Return of Pospisil, Martin Pospisil. He's
Oh
another
yeah,
guy.
yeah, totally forgot about Marty. He has been so much fun. I mean, I've covered Marty Pospisil for years. My very first season in the American Hockey League press box, I was there when he suffered a really bad knee injury on a dirty, dirty hit in a game against the Laval Rocket, and he was done for the year after that. He had to go get shoulder surgery as well on an unrelated thing, but he had torn a couple of things in his knee as well on that hit. And Marty is a guy who's just had the worst injury luck in the world before this season, and obviously he's hurt right now, but it's not supposed to be that serious. But just a wonderful, wonderful story. A guy who, coming into this season in the summer, I wasn't sure was going to be qualified as a free agent. I was thinking that this was a guy who had just gotten drawn the short end of the stick and had come to the end of his rope. And I was so happy to be wrong about that, because I always thought Marty had the chops to be an NHL player. Something a lot of people don't know about Marty Pospisil is that in the American League, he spent a lot of time playing center. And this is a guy who is a better skater than people give him credit for. He has better skill than people give him credit for. Even when they first drafted him, I was like, well, I don't really get it. Is this guy just a goon, or what is? No, he's way more skilled. And the minute that I first saw him play, I was thinking to myself, they might have something in this guy. I've been a fan of his for years and years, and I'm so excited to see him finally making that impact. Now, where I chafe a little bit with Pospisil is players saying, or people saying, that he's potentially a core piece. I think Marty Pospisil is a terrific player, and I think he will have a terrific career. I think you are looking at a guy who maybe tops out at being a guy like, I don't know, Casey Cizikas or something. But Casey Cizikas, even with him being the best fourth line center in the NHL, he's not a core player. He is a very good player to have, but he's not a guy you build around. He is a guy who you were happy to have, but you would trade if somebody better came along. And that is not intended as any disrespect to Marty Pospisil, who I think the world of, but it's just a case of being realistic and comparing what the Flames have to what other teams have, not just comparing what the Flames have to the other players that the Flames have. Marty Pospisil stands out compared to other players who the Flames have, and that is that is full credit to him to do that. But you look at what other teams have, teams in Vancouver, Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, Brock Besser, and the Flames just don't stack up in that regard when you look at their core. So Marty Pospisil, there are players on the Canucks who are very much like Marty Pospisil, but they are buried deep in their lineup, and that is why they are so effective, because they have that leeway to be against lesser competition, to be deployed in the proper way. And if the Flames don't start adding more pieces to their system to push guys down into their proper slotting, which they should do, and I think they have the resources to do, then I think they'll be in rougher shape, because that's what they need. They need guys like Connor Zary not to be on their top line, to be on their second line. And they need guys like Jacob Pelche to be not on their second line, but on their third line. And they need guys like Marty Pospisil to not be on their third line, but on their fourth line. And if they can do that, I think they'll be a fantastic team with all those three players involved.
Yeah, one of my what you call outlook going into the game after the All Star would be how the fourth line will look like, especially with now Greer out of the lineup with a broken foot for about 8 weeks. It will be interesting to see who gets called up back again. Few other thoughts, Mike. I don't know how much time you have left
I mean,
here.
as much as you need.
All right, as much as all right. My next thought is return of Oliver Shillington. I was at the first game he returned. That was against Columbus Blue Jackets. Tickets were not so expensive, so I booked it. Not the fun game either, but he looked good. Thoughts on Oliver Shillington returning to the Flames lineup? How key has that been?
Well, this time last year, I never thought it would happen. I mean, I did not think we would get to this point with Oliver. It's not that I didn't think it was going to happen. I was just very skeptical. And it's just, we had not heard anything, and that was completely fine by me because it was his business to deal with what he was going through. And I just didn't, and especially then once he tried to come back at the start of the year, and then he had to take a step back again and just regroup. That was when I was thinking, especially, boy, I really hope he can pull through, but I'm not sure it's going to ever happen. And I was even talking to Craig Conroy at a flame skate that I was at where Oliver was, and he said the same thing. He wasn't sure we were ever going to get to this point, but now that we're here, it is just wonderful, and it is an objectively positive story. Oliver, I've had my interactions with him when he was down with the Wranglers, and just such a I have talked to a lot of hockey players. I have talked to players on different teams, different organizations. There are few players who talk like Oliver does and who answer questions with the sort of integrity that he does, where he thinks out his answers and really speaks, I think, from the heart. And especially, given what he has been through. Now I can't say what he's been through, but it comes out in just what it means for him to be back. And you've seen it in terms of how he responded to the tributes that he was given. It just struck me as somebody who is just trying to take it all in and absorb it. And when he came back, I was expecting somebody who maybe wasn't quite ready. No, he's been ready. He has been skating, skating, skating to get to this point, and he has looked unbelievable. I mean, he has looked so good in the last two games, where you can, I think, say that he looks like a genuine bona fide top four defenseman, which, I mean, I didn't know if we would see Shillington back, let alone at this level. And so I think it is a wonderful story. I think, he might win the Bill Masterton Trophy this year, which, I would love to see, because that's the sort of thing that a player and a person like him deserves. It would be, I think, just a wonderful cap off to what has been an otherwise so-so season, to have this shining beacon in Oliver, who is just he's a beautiful player to watch. I mean, I think you can agree with that, because he's just such a great skater. There aren't players out there. You can't just pick up guys like him off of trees who can skate like he can. It's the sort of thing that just makes you feel warm inside to see a guy like Oliver come back with the success that he has had.
Yeah, well said, Mike. Yeah, the standing innovation that he got on the return. Like I said, I was at the game. I was just browsing through my Twitter feed. If I can pull that video for you, that I recorded, but the applause from the crowd, and you saying so. This was my first time seeing Oliver Shillington play as a new. I don't know. I don't know if I can call myself a newish Flames fan. I've been just following since late of 2022, and having never seen him play before. And then the Johnny missing the Johnny Gaudreau and Kachak combo and all that, which I haven't seen. Yeah, I was really impressed that he was able to come back, and as well the Flames taking it easy and slow on him to give the time all he needs. That was fantastic to see as well. All right, few final points. Where do we go? Okay, so we are gonna come back after 1 week All Star break. The All Star break is right now. Would you see any drastic line changes? Anything drastic, whether it be trade wise or players wise, coming into the February 6th game against Boston Bruins, where they kickstart a road trip?
Well, they're gonna have to call up some guys, because they sent some guys down for the All-Star break. They sent Klapka down. They sent Schwintz down. They sent Dewar down, I think. So they might not bring up the same guys. They might give a guy like Emilio Pettersson a whirl. They might bring up a Ben Jones. I don't know. Either way, though, I mean, there is the chance they make a trade during the All-Star break. If they were to trade anybody, I think it would be either Lindholm or Tanev. They have reinforcements at both positions. Excuse me. Might make it more easy, or might make it easier to stomach a Tanev trade, is the fact that Jeremy Poirier has started skating for the Wranglers. So we will hopefully see him back in their lineup at some point in February. I would hope. I mean, I don't know for certain. I've been seeing Poirier around the Saddledome for months, and it's been a very long road to recovery for him after just a terrible cut by a skate to his arm, and really tough. I mean, I think he maybe even got lucky. It wasn't pretty from what I've heard. So the fact that he is coming back is great, and it gives them a bit more insurance if they need to call up a guy like Ilya Solovyov if Tanev is gone. And then the same with Elias Lindholm, where if they move him, I'm not I wouldn't rule out the possibility that they get a young forward back as part of return. I mean, I look at a team like the Rangers that is purportedly all over Lindholm. Would they give up a guy like Capo Caco? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, he's had his struggles this season. He is only, I think, 22 years old, 22, 23. And, he's shown really good promise before. The Rangers just haven't had really a top six spot to put him in. Well, I look at Capo Caco and say, maybe you put him next to a guy like Nazem Kadri. And, where a guy like Matt Coronado has had some struggles, I would say, when he's been up. Maybe you put him on a line with Kadri and Yegor Sharangovich. I don't know. The other guy who I was thinking of as a potential player who you can get back and plug into your lineup right now is a guy like Anton Lundell. This is a guy who was suggested to me just earlier today by a friend of mine, and Lundell is a guy who in Florida has kind of fallen down the lineup since they made their coaching change, and Paul Maurice has not really had a ton of time for him. So I think with Lundell, if you are maybe sending them Elias Lindholm, I don't know. Maybe you send them Elias Lindholm and put him with Kachuk, and maybe you can get Lundell back. I don't know. Or maybe they're a team that wants Noah Hannafin because they have had some question marks on defense. I think they have both Gustav Forsling. Did they re-sign? I'm trying to remember if they re-signed the other guy, Brandon Montour. I think they did actually. But they have Gustav Forsling, who is set to be an unrestricted free agent this year. And, maybe they are a team that looks to add Noah Hannafin on defense, and they send him out east where he likes to be. And maybe they're primed to give up a guy like Anton Lundell. And maybe if you trade Lindholm, you can bring in a guy like Lundell and slide him right in there next to Jonathan Huberdeau, his former teammate. I don't know. It is going to be interesting to see how any potential trades affect that, because mark my words, and I think this is if and when the Flames do trade any of their three UFAs, they will get at least one player back in return who is ready to slot in right now. I am quite confident in that belief. It just tracks with everything they've ever done. I mean, even going back to the 2016 trade deadline when they sold Curtis Glencross and Yuri Hudler, or I guess Glencross was the year before, when they traded Yuri Hudler and Chris Russell and David Jones all that year. They did from Dallas when they traded Chris Russell. They got a defenseman back in Jyrki Jokipaka, who they played as a regular for the next year. They played him basically sliding right into his spot, into Russell's vacated spot. And this time, I think the Flames are going to have even more incentive to do that because they want to retool. They don't want to rebuild. So they're going to want to get a guy like Lundell or Capo Caco or Bo Byram or whoever and put them in a spot that it was vacated by a player. That's just my thought. But we'll see how it goes down.
All right, few final points from our viewers watching online. First of all, thanks for joining us online this afternoon. Once again, we will quickly wrap up the show here soon. We'll let Mike go in for the rest of the day, but we'll hit on a few points. If you have final questions or thoughts, send it our way. Our Twitter line is open at CJY_Anand, and our YouTube live chat is open, AS Vlog. So first question is thoughts on All-Star skills and competitions and game. And it was in overseas. I think it isn't worth a watch aside the PWHL 3 versus 3. So I'll kick it off with Mike. I haven't seen an all-star game or skills competition before, so it might be on my to-do list to see a bit of it, at least if I can find some free time. But your thoughts, Mike, on a little bit about the all-star skills and competition?
Well, I watched the actual All-Star game last year at a pub in Montreal, an Irish pub with the Athletics' Julian McKenzie, and we were just hanging out because I was down that way on a trip to see the AHL All-Star game and chat with Mitch Love and Dustin Wolf and Matthew Phillips and some other players who were there, and so we watched it together, and we were like, this is okay. It wasn't great, right? what I think will be a lot of fun is the draft. The draft was always so much fun when they did it, 10 years ago. I remember watching because Jerome McGinley was always part of the draft, right? Because he was always an all-star. And I would watch just to see where he would get picked, who would pick him. And he was always, sort of one of the middle of the pack players who was picked. And it was always fun to see who would be picked last. There was the year that Alex Ovechkin wanted to be picked last because he wanted the free car. There was the year that Phil Kessel was picked last, and Alex Ovechkin made fun of him by taking a photo of him. I mean, it was always so much fun to watch. And so this year, I know they're not doing it exactly the same, but I think that the fantasy draft element of it will be really fun. That's happening tomorrow, I think. I mean, I think I've got to tune in for all of it because of my work obligations with Daily Faceoff. I'm sure they'll get me to write about something about it. The skills competition, I mean, I know they've changed it this year with some input from Connor McDavid. I find it hard to care about it, especially now that Johnny Gaudreau isn't participating in it. I mean, if he had still been with the Flames, I am sure he would be one of the 12 players who would be participating because he was a highlight reel when he was here, right? But obviously there are going to be 12 players in it, and it's whatever. If you are a fan of one of the players who is participating, I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. And the game itself, I mean, yeah, I agree. The women's game is going to be great. I'll tune in for that. The rest of it, aside from the fantasy draft, which I always love, it's an all-star game. It is what it is.
All right, and then Tuxedo says, I would lovely absolute Lundell. We need players at the center position. And final point, Byram's a beauty. So let's look forward to the trade deadline or the trade draft coming up soon. The All Star game, we'll see if Lindom gets dealt with. And anything else you wanted to add, Mike? I know I put questions out there for you, topics and everything, but anything you wanted to add, anything you want to ask me, any final points we should cover going
I
away from this
well,
episode?
yeah, okay. So first of all, I think with the center position, with a guy like Anton Lundell, for me, my thought process is you just want to get as many bullets as possible down the middle. You want to have as many talented players as possible, and not all of them are going to work out, but at least some of them will. And if you have the number of players, if you have a guy like Zary and you have a guy like Lundell, and say you draft two centers in the next two first rounds of the NHL draft. Say you go into this year's draft and you get a Caden Lindstrom or a Berkeley Catton, and then you go next year and you get somebody too at center, and maybe you make a couple of second round picks both those years too, and maybe a couple of them are centers, then I think you feel way better. The Flames for years have not stocked the cupboards enough, so they didn't have any redundancy when guys like Sam Bennett didn't work. They didn't have any backup options. I hate to go back to Arizona, but I look at how they, in the same year, they picked Logan Cooley at 3, and then they picked Connor Geekie at 11. They got two centers in the top 11 of a draft. That is something that Calgary needs to try and emulate. Now, they might not have two picks that high, but, they get another first-round pick for a guy like Lindholm or Hannafin, and all of a sudden they keep their own first-round pick, and it ends up being in the top 10. Well, there's a chance that maybe you can pick at 6 or 6 and 16, or at 7 or 20, and you can maybe get two centers that way, or a center and a defenseman. It is not just about quality of picks, it is about quantity as well. You need to have that redundancy in your organization for when a player who you think is can't miss, like a Sam Bennett, who I think everybody thought was going to be a top 6 center and wasn't. When a guy like that doesn't work, you have that backup option. The Flames don't really have that depth right now. They don't even have the number one option to begin with right now. That's something that they can maybe try and get at this year's draft. And Berkeley Catton, I agree, Tuxedo. He's very intriguing. I think he's a guy who gets a little bit underrated. Caden Lindstrom is a huge, huge prize, I think, for whoever gets him. And then obviously, if you win the draft lottery and you get Macklin Celebrini, then you're laughing. You're like, oh boy, then we are in such good shape because that's maybe our future cornerstone. That's the guy who you can hang your hat around and say, this is the future of the Calgary Flames. And there's a chance that happens with those other two guys as well. But you just need that extra bit of pick value. I look at the last 10 drafts that the Flames have made. They have made fewer than 7 picks. There are 7 draft rounds. You start out with 7 picks every year. They have made fewer than 7 picks in 7 of the last 10 drafts. That to me is unacceptable, given how they haven't made the playoffs in the majority of those years. They have gone make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, and then the last 2 years are going to be both misses. This year is going to be a miss, and then last year was a miss too. And yet last year they only made 6 picks. The year before they only made 3 picks. I mean, they have had so many years where they've made 5 picks. They have not made enough picks. And after the second round of the draft, it is all a guessing game. And you can get guys like TJ Brody and Johnny Gaudreau in the fourth round, or you can get the guys like Mitchell Matson and JD Watt and Mitch Wall and whoever. But you are never certain. You need to have that many picks. The Flames have the organizational capacity to make 10, 11, 12 picks this year, next year. It's just about their wherewithal, their will to do so. And that's not to say that they can't also get guys like Anton Lundell, Bo Byram, Capo Caco in potential trades. I just think the standard needs to be higher in Calgary. They need to do both, and they need to commit to being the very best. And I think they have a pathway to doing it. Just a matter of if they decide to execute it that way.
And Tuxedo asks, do you project Hansek to play center at all?
Honestly, Tuxedo, I don't really know because I haven't really seen Sam Honzek play. I went out to Vancouver earlier this month. I wanted to go see a Vancouver Giants game, but my time frame was just so limited. I saw him a little bit at the World Juniors. I think he was playing wing there as well. You know, he's such an interesting prospect because he's 6'4". His production last year was solid. It has not been amazing this year, but that's because I think in large part because he's been injured for part of the season. I won't really know anything about Sam Honzek and how he projects until I see him as a pro. You know, my perception of a guy like Matt Coronado from when he was in college to when he has been in the American League has changed dramatically. I think the player who we saw in college and the player who we've seen as a pro is completely different. And it could be exactly the same for Sam Honzek. I mean, I look at a guy like Yuri Kulich in Buffalo, where, you know, when they drafted him and then when he came to the American League, he stood out right away as being an impactful American League player at age 19. And maybe that's the case with Sam Honzek as soon as he joins the Wranglers, but I just don't know until I see him. But, I mean, that would be an amazing story. And if he pans out the way that people talk about him, you're looking at maybe a guy who can be a premier power forward in this league, a guy who can be, you know, I think of guys around the league like maybe a Mason Marchment, but stronger, or a Lawson Krause or a Tom Wilson. Maybe not with as much grit in their games, but just, you know, I mean, the other guy who was a pie in the sky comparable is a guy like Mark Stone, just in terms of that physicality, but not the overly gritty stuff. Just that presence that he brings on the ice, where he can just barrel through you like a freight train, while also having the wherewithal to be able to carry the puck, shoot the puck, make plays. But again, that's just a pure archetype comparable. That is not me saying I have seen this player, this is who I think he's going to be, because I just haven't seen him enough to give you that honest opinion on him.
Yeah, I haven't also seen Hanzak play that much. I know he does put in points and assists with the club he's playing right now. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what he can produce down the road. And yeah, sounds like he's an interesting prospect. There are a few out in the list. We'll see what we can get. Maybe one final question. Is Hansek? I'm I'm guess referring to Hansek again. Is Hansek a more polished version of Rushitska?
Maybe. I mean, Adam Ruzicka was always such an interesting player to me because he had this off switch and this on switch that he never could seem to control. Or maybe he did have control over. I don't know, but it was just a matter of which player you were going to get on any given night. I have not seen Hanzik enough. The only thing that I know about them together is that they are both from Slovakia. That is about it. So when he arrives in the Wranglers organization, I will tell you, I will be at those games. I will have eyes on him, and I will see what he can do. I mean, by then, the hope is probably that Rory Cairns is your number one center in with the Wranglers, and maybe you can put Hanzik on his wing or whoever they draft in the first or second round this year. I don't know, but yeah, like that's it's all speculative for me at this point. I can't say anything for certain.
All right, one final point, sorry, Mike. But Nick DeSimone. So we lost Adam Rashidska with the Weber, and then we lost Nick DeSimone. What were your thoughts on that one? And New Jersey claiming Nick DeSimone?
It's tough. I thought DeSimone was better than Jordan Osterley. I would have waived Osterley and kept Nick DeSimone. But at the end of the day, this is a player who, you can find on the market, and the Flames did in the first place. They signed DeSimone as a non-qualified free agent from the San Jose Sharks organization back in, I think, 2021. He was a very good partner for guys like Ilya Solovyov with the American League team. He was a guy who came up and I think made the most of an opportunity that he got with the Flames. And I think there's a chance maybe he ends up on waivers again, and Calgary claims him back. But it is something that happens in the sport. It is never a great look to lose two players on waivers in the same day, but it's something they got to live with, and it opens the door for players like Solovyov to come back up, for Jan Kuznetsov to come back up. And he's a guy who ultimately you can probably replace.
Gotcha. Do you foresee that happening with Roshitska too? Maybe they send him back on waivers and then we claim and then put him in regulars, or is that what do
I,
you?
I think I think that is less likely because Arizona just needs the bodies right now because they've been dealing with some injuries. Yeah, they're probably going to trade a guy like Jason Zucker at the deadline, and they don't really have that bona fide guy to come up like Dylan Gunther was when they recalled him. They need a guy like Ruzicka. I think more than New Jersey needs a guy like DeSimone. So I don't anticipate Ruzicka coming back. DeSimone, I could maybe see it.
All right, thank you, Mike. All right, your final zone. I'll give you the zone. Where can people find you? Any interesting projects you're doing, where they can reach you out to, and yeah, overall final comments from you.
Yeah, my Twitter account is at Mike T. Gould. Lots of stuff coming out right now about the state of junior A hockey in Western Canada. Obviously, as Anand introduced me at the start of the show, I am affiliated with the Okotoks Oilers. I do a lot of work for them, and it is an interesting time to be working for that team. I love it, love it, love it, and it is a fascinating enterprise that is unfolding right now with the whole talk of them joining another league. I don't really have a whole lot I can say about that at this point, but I just am so excited to continually be part of that. Hope we can get our players back on the ice at a point here soon where they belong, and I would stay tuned for updates coming soon.
Alright, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I just also started volunteering or partially working with Calgary Canucks as well. I did a bit of the replay machine, so taking replays and clipping those highlights, and as well bit of color commentary. So that's fun. Always, ever since I became a hockey fan, I always loved doing hockey related stuff. All right, thanks, Mike, for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the rest of the day. Have a great week ahead. All Star break is up ahead for you, Flames fans, February 3rd and 4th. And then we get back into Flames games on February 6th when we are on a road trip against Boston Bruins. Thanks for joining Mike and I this afternoon. Have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon, and we'll see you again on another episode.